Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. I am joined by my very special guest, author of Anna, A Story of Redemption, Melanie Powers. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting me here.
It's my pleasure, and before we get too far into the content of the book, let me go ahead and let everyone at home know you can get information on the book as well as purchase a copy of the book at luke145.com. That's Luke and then the digits 145.com. So Anna, A Story of Redemption is a fiction novel.
Yes, it is.
It is based in biblical times.
Yes.
And obviously about a young woman named Anna, and it kind of takes us through the vast majority of her life. Tell us a little bit about Anna.
Well, the book begins with Anna at 15. She's at home with her mother, like you said, in biblical times. And her father walks in and he makes this grand announcement that he has found a husband for her. She is now betrothed to a perfect stranger. She doesn't know him. She doesn't know his name. And in 4 months, she will marry this man. She will go to his home and become his property for the most part and have his children. And her father is somewhat exasperated with her that she's not excited about this.
How dare she not be excited
Yes.
about being married to a stranger?
Yes.
And she's a very independent, free spirit, so it kind of crushes her dreams a little bit.
Anna wants to travel. She wants to see the world. She wants to become educated, which of course was not very popular in those days for women because women were property and you did what your father said to do and then you married and you did what your husband said to do. And so, but Anna was just a little bit different. She's a little ahead of her time and a very, like you said, independent woman. She had some very different kind of thoughts that most Jewish people did during those days. And so this was not something that made her happy at all.
So it sounds like she is a little boxed in by what's acceptable for her time, some of the religious and political views on women. So, talking about some people who may possibly read this book, it's really something that we can identify with, even though it is set in biblical times. It's something that the modern day woman can still identify with.
Well, I've done some traveling, done some mission trips out of the country and to Ghana and to the Philippines and other nations. And the needs and the wants of humanity do not change. I don't think they change from generation to generation or from nation to nation. She had hopes and dreams and desires that she wanted to fulfill, and when her father walked in that day and announced that, they were all taken from her. But in the middle of all of this, Anna's great strength is that she believed God has a plan and that God wants to be personally involved with their life. And so even in the middle of this thing that had come into her life, being betrothed, as they called it in those days, to a perfect stranger, she trusted God enough to believe that somehow God would make this work for her.
And so in the book we see what God is able to do in her life, because it takes us really through her marriage. She has children. Her life takes many, many twists and turns. Tell us a little bit about some of the things she goes through.
Well, first of all, it's a story of the faithfulness of God, the love of God, but it's also a very tender, sweet love story between her and the man that she marries. He is everything every woman would want a man to be, a husband. All the women who've read the book are very protective with this man, and they've told me, do not touch him, do not harm him, because he's just wonderful. So the character of her husband is very strong, and the actual story is at least a 50-year span of her life. And it takes, you said, for her children and even to her grandchildren, it takes her into the middle of the political arena of Rome. And she has to deal with that. It also causes her to have to come face to face with the leaders of Israel, the high priest and the Sanhedrin, who were the rulers of that day, who had no regard for women at all, much less a woman who would not submit to their desires and submit to their rules and the way they wanted things to be. And Anna was just not going to be pushed down and denied what she believed God would have her to have.
Wow, so she's a fighter.
She's very much a fighter. She's very much ahead of her time. She really is. She would fit in today's society quite well, probably.
And so you mentioned that some of the people that you have read the book, I think I mentioned earlier that this is your first novel.
Yes, it is.
And so as part of that experience, you had a focus group.
Yes.
And it was about 50% men, 50% women, from all walks of life,
Yes.
all political and religious backgrounds. Tell me what the reaction was from the different parties in the focus group.
Well, the characters were developed strong enough, thankfully, that everybody could identify with the characters. They could identify with Anna when she was joyful. They could identify with Anna when she wasn't joyful. They could identify with the men in the story. One of the comments that I constantly got was that I made because in the book, the Apostle Peter and his wife are very much a part of the book. But I actually put flesh upon this person because in the Bible it doesn't tell you much about him personally. Well, I tell you about him personally, and I tell you about his wife, how they met, and what drove her to him, what was so wonderful about Peter that she just had to marry that man. So there's a lot of things that you won't find in the Bible that you will find in this book. It's a great love story. It's a great historical book. It has historical accuracy. If you like festivals of the Jewish community, you're going to like that. But most of all, it is a wonderful, tender, sweet love story.
And I have actually had the privilege of reading the book myself. Like we said, it is a book whether you like fiction, whether you like history, regardless of your political beliefs. It's something anyone and everyone can enjoy. So thank you so much for joining me today. There's so much more to the book. We didn't have time to get into it all, the twists and turns. Every time you think you know what's about to happen, out of nowhere the story completely changes. Extremely well written. You'll be very emotionally involved in the story. Go to Luke145.com and order your copy today. And again, Melanie Powers, author of Anna, A Story of Redemption. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.